So I'm going to say this to you now because I'm moving this toward a few minutes of prayer. Our founders, in spite of what the media, the liberals, the modern education system tries to tell you, our founders understood what I just said to you. The three most frequently quoted people by our founders when historians studied 15,000 documents written, either letters or booklets or articles written by our founding fathers, 15,000. The most quoted people in those 15,000 documents were, number one, God. And I mean this book right here. This one, the Bible, quoted by them more than any other person, God. Number two, Montesquieu. Ever heard of Montesquieu? A man who lived a century or two before them, wrote about God and government. He's the one who proposed our model of government based on three branches: legislative, judicial, and executive. And he based that on the verse God quoted to me in Washington, D.C., because I am government, Isaiah 33:22. He's our lawgiver, he's our judge, and he's our king. And Montesquieu said if God governs that way through a legislative, judicial, and executive branch, lawgiver, judicial, king, if he does that, then any smart government on planet Earth would be wise to pattern itself after heaven. So human government, which is supposed to be an extension of heaven's government, would be wise to pattern it after him and let his legislative mind, anointing, whatever, call it what you will, flow through them and be administered through them, and his judicial anointing, ways, mind, flow through them, and executive, king. And our founders founded our government structure based on Ezekiel 33:22. How many of you were taught that in school? Not very many. Footnoted in here. Montesquieu was the second most quoted. John Locke was the third most quoted. He's the guy that said, when all else fails, appeal to heaven. And Washington took it and put it on a flag, and our nation was born under a prayer movement. And our battles were won, the Revolutionary War, under a banner that said, appeal to heaven. Ben Franklin. I don't have time to read this, but I'm going to read it anyway. Not that pastor gave me a deadline, but I just understand how it works. Because I pastored for a while, and some of y'all's kids. That's why you want me to keep preaching, because you're not the one watching your kids. So, you know, Ben Franklin, and when they're, you know, our nation wins the war, and now we're forming our government, and there's the Constitutional Congress, and they're trying to work through the Constitution and all the laws and principles we're going to function under, and they can't get it done because human nature is in the way, and they're fighting each other. And one of the most unreligious members of that group, Ben Franklin, who probably died as a believer, but probably was not a believer at this point. He was probably saved under the preaching of Whitefield. he stood up with this appeal. The small progress we have made after 4 or 5 weeks of close attendance and continual reasonings with each other is, methinks, this is early language, a melancholy proof of the imperfection of the human understanding. I'd love to say that to Congress, wouldn't you? I'd love to give this speech in Congress. Methinks your understanding is not good. How has it happened, sir, that we have not hitherto once thought of humbly applying to the Father of lights to illuminate our understanding? In the beginning of the contest with Great Britain, when we were sensible of danger, we had daily prayer in this room for divine protection. Our prayers, sir, were heard, and they were graciously answered. All of us who were engaged in the struggle must have observed frequent instances of a superintending providence in our favor. To that kind providence, we owe this happy opportunity of consulting in peace on the means of establishing our future national felicity. And have we now forgotten that powerful friend? I have lived, sir, a long time. And the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men. And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings that except the Lord build, they labor in vain that build it. I firmly believe this. And I also believe that without his concurring aid, we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of Babel. We shall be divided by our little partial local interests. Our projects will be confounded, and we ourselves shall become a reproach and a byword down to future ages. I therefore beg leave to move, I make a motion in other words, that henceforth prayers imploring the assistance of heaven and its blessings on our deliberations be held in this assembly every morning before we proceed to business, and that one or more of the clergy of this city be requested to officiate in that service. And they did, and he did, and that's how the custom started of every day of Congress beginning with somebody leading in prayer. Our founders understood the God of government